Now that we discussed Iran, let's get into Iraq. There never had been a state, empire, or nation of Iraq before British statesmen created it in the wake of World War I. Iraq was the term used by the classical Arab geographers for this region and continued to be the common Arabic name for Mesopotamia down to the modern era. In the past, it had been the powerful empires of the Assyrians and Babylonians. Also, the Persian Empire of Cyrus the Great. Iraq had never been a single political unit, and during the Ottoman era was divided into 3 separate provinces. In the railway portions of the Ottoman Empire, just before World War I, the powers recognized one another's claim to spheres of influence via understanding about areas where each was free to build or prevent the building of railways. Britain had established its supremacy in the southern part of Iraq. This claim was related primarily to a desire to control the communications of southern Mesopotamia with the Gulf and India, between there and the Mediterranean. Although it was known that there was oil in both the south and north of the country. This pre-war recognition for the British interest in southern Iraq was expanded in the 1916 Sykes-Pike Accords between the Allied powers into a zone where Britain was to have direct and exclusive control. Thus, Britain would dominate the shortest course from the Mediterranean to the Gulf that was later used for land and air routes and an oil pipeline. Britain therefore created a buffer between their possessions and those of its old rival Russia. At the World War I peace treaty negotiations, Britain got a share of oil from France and the region. Thus, in a few moments, did the two countries dispose of the future of northern Iraq, its people and resources. If you look at the post-negotiations of World War I, you look at the map before and you look at it after, you have many different continents, many different countries, many different empires, different territorial losses. That is when you had the Balfour Declaration, I think it was called. It's been a while since I've studied World War I, so forgive me, it's not fresh in my memory. But that was when they gave the Jewish state to Israel, and that's why today you have the Palestinian and Israel conflict, Jewish conflict rather, culminating today. And a lot of the problems that we face today in the Middle East is because of the peace negotiations in World War I. The Ottoman Empire completely ceased to exist. Turkey became an independent state. Austria became its own country. Austria-Hungary ceased to exist. So it's very interesting if you get time to look into this. But back to the matter at hand. Iraq revolted in 1920, but it was crushed before it became nationwide. It was crushed, however, through 1921 it was crushed by the employment of air power against civilians. Thus, in 1921, at the Cairo Conference, presided over by Churchill, now the colonial secretary, that dude's everywhere, right? Like Johnny Cash, he's been everywhere. The British reorganized their presence through its League of Nations mandate in Iraq. This was to be done by instituting indirect rule of the country through installing the Prince Faisal, recently expelled from Syria by the French, as king of the new, quote, independent Iraqi state. Thus originated an Iraqi regime that lasted until 1958 and through which Britain preserved its military bases and influence in Iraq, all while simultaneously alienating the Iraq people. One of the most crucial matters to be negotiated was an agreement to explore for and produce oil. The British were intent on excluding the Ottomans and others, most notably the United States. The British used the Turkish Petroleum Company to exploit the oil. An accord was agreed to between the new Iraqi government and the TPC, which in 1929 became the Iraqi Petroleum Company. Now, this government was really a puppet of the British Empire. It was initiated in 1925. Iraqi rapidly became a major producer of oil, with its rich fields eventually connected to the Mediterranean via a pipeline across British-controlled Jordan and Palestine, terminating at Tripoli and Sidon. Britain had thus acquired the oil of Iraq on advantageous terms and the means to transport it to the sea. France and the U.S. had been bought off with 23.75% shares of Iraqi petroleum for their oil companies. Although Iraq received a certain amount of revenue from its oil, the majority of the profits went to the foreign companies that controlled production in Iraq, just like it did in Iran, and later on in Kuwait and Bahrain. In the first three, it was Anglo-Persian, and thereafter BP, with its position in the three countries, and enabled Britain to be able to shift production to other countries in order to extract pressure on any government that got out of line, as in Iran during the 1951 to 53 oil crisis there. Understandably, the population, and this is about Iraq, had a bitterness about foreign control over its oil, which was its most valuable resource. Exploiting this resentment was popular for Iraqi political parties, and it played a major role in the popularity of the Ba'ath government when it finally nationalized the Iraqi oil industry in 1975. And that's what party Saddam Hussein was a part of. So you look at all these things, and it all impacts us today. That's why it's important to understand history, because it still impacts us and millions of people. And that's how they were able to overthrow the leader in Iran, is they stopped producing oil in that country and shifted to other countries. Therefore, instead of getting crumbs, Iran got nothing. So, part 3, we'll get into Saudi Arabia and the creation of OPEC and the world's global energy supply.